All negotiations are similar in that they involve people taking initial positions, offering proposals, counter-proposals, and concessions until finally coming to an agreement. The two main ways of looking at negotiation are distributive, win-lose, and integrative, win-win.
The number one thing you need to understand about negotiations is that most people aren't very good at it. Why does this matter? Because if you understand that, you realize that by making a small investment in upping your negotiation skills, you're going to be able to get a lot of mileage out of that. The number two thing that you need to pay attention to is understanding yourself. Now, I know this seems pretty general, so I'm going to get a little bit more specific. But first off, you need to know what your BATNA is. So BATNA stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. Basically, the BATNA is where you're not going to go anywhere less than. I know any of you guys out there own a company, or if you've ever agreed to something that you take a step back and maybe the next day or even later that day, you're like, man, why did I agree to that? You know what I'm talking about. You felt that because you didn't have a set BATNA when you went into the negotiation. And we negotiate all the time. Every time you go into a store and you make a purchase, there's a bit of a negotiation there. It seems like it's one way, but there's a lot of stores that you can actually bargain with. In a negotiation, and this again is part two of knowing yourself, is be careful of focal points. And these are emotional things that, we're emotional beings. So oftentimes there are certain things that we focus in on in a negotiation, and we get laser focused and we forget about all the other things around the negotiation. 3, knowing others. I went ahead and I looked at her. I looked at her wants. I looked at her needs. I looked at her alternatives. And all of a sudden I realized that, she had been pushed on price. So knowing yourself, knowing others. And that's understanding the situation. So many negotiations it's not just a one-shot deal. Many of them are repetitive, or it's a long-term negotiation. So you've got to think about the situation. So that's number 4. Ideology. Those are things, you look at what's going on in the Middle East. There's a reason why they have had conflict for as long as over a couple thousand years. Simply ideology. The inability for people to agree on some very basic fundamentals. Is this a negotiation of necessity or opportunity? Now, if anyone's a Star Trek fan, you remember the part where the Klingons actually had to negotiate with the Federation because, something exploded? I don't remember which Star Trek it was. But I was like, they've got to negotiate because basically it's out of necessity, versus a negotiation of opportunity is one that probably both parties could walk away from a little bit easier. And is agreement required? Whenever you're getting a divorce, an agreement is required versus if, other ones in which an agreement isn't required. Make the first offer. Power of fairness. Now, this one's very interesting because they've done these studies in which they give people $1. And they say, okay, you guys need to divide it up. One person's going to divide. However, the other person can veto the whole deal and say, well, we're just no deal and we're not going to get anything. And what they find is that a lot of people, they simply go 50-50 because it's fair. It seems like that's the right thing to do. But what happens when someone starts going 60-40, 70-30? And literally, because they're the one dividing and they get to take the first share, and then they're going to leave that 30 cents or that 20 cents for the other person, well, shouldn't that other person just accept it? Because, it's better than getting 0. But logic doesn't apply here because they violate the rule of fairness. And the farther they do violate that rule, most people are going to say, that is not fair. You're completely ripping me off, and I'm going to go with 0. Expand the pie.
Distributive bargaining emphasizes individual gains. Resources are viewed as limited, and everyone wants to claim their share of the pie. Distributive bargainers tend to avoid sharing or misrepresent information and view other parties as the enemy to be defeated. Integrative bargaining emphasizes joint gains. By engaging in cooperative problem solving, the goal of integrative bargaining is to expand the pie so there's more for everyone. Integrative bargainers tend to share information openly and view other parties as a partner or teammate.
Win-win situations. Most people are ineffective when they negotiate. Number 2, know yourself. Number 3, know the other party. Know who you're negotiating with. Number 4, understand the situation. Number 5, make the first offer. Number 6, understand the power of fairness. And number 7, expand the pie.
The key message in Getting to Yes. It's the story of an orange. To be precise, one orange and two people who both want it. They argue about ownership for a while and eventually decide to divide it, half each. And so they separate, feeling they achieved the fairest solution. What they don't know is why the other person needed the orange. If they had, then the solution would have been quite different, because one wanted the peel to use in baking a cake and the other wanted the fruit to eat. Had they known that, they each would have gotten twice as much, and they most certainly would have got to yes a whole lot more quickly. If you haven't heard that story, maybe you didn't see it coming. That's because in negotiations we focus on our positions, as in I want the orange, rather than the underlying interests that drive those positions, as in I want to bake an orange cake. It sounds so obvious when it's explained, yet we persist in taking positions which tend to be I win, you lose confrontations, often missing solutions that best address the interests of both sides. If we can see our way to take the interests-driven route, it's so much easier to get to yes.
In all integrative negotiations, it's important to keep in mind the following tips of principled negotiation. Separate the people from the problem. It is possible to be soft on the people, but still hard on the problem, even if you perceive the people as the reason for the problem. Focus on interests, not positions. Sometimes people take positions that don't reflect their real interests. Focus on the reasons why people want what they're asking for. Positions are changeable. Invent options for mutual gain. In any given scenario, there is more than one solution. Make sure you are brainstorming to think of every possible solution that could get you to a resolution. Use objective criteria. Rather than making negotiations a contest of will, concentrate on using a standard agreed-upon measure of success that everyone can work toward. When several people or organizations are involved in a negotiation, it becomes a complex interaction that requires serious consideration and a range of approaches recognizing this complexity. Commitment. Key people and resources must give top priority to the issue at the heart of the dialogue. Capacity. Physical, organizational, and human resources must be available to participate. Consensus. The goal must be a solution where everyone wins. Consciousness. Dialogue must be weaved into the system rather than something extraneous to the organization.
2 important objectives that help us achieve superior agreements: fairness and efficiency. Divide the benefits fairly and don't leave value on the table.